Ahoy there folks! Today's video is a little bit different as it's not the kind of game I would normally play, but very occasionally developers reach out to me and say, hey look, we've got a game we'd love you to cover on your channel, let us know what you think. And Super Rare Games are a company that has reached out to me in the past. If you remember, I did a video on Grapple Dog, which is very much not the kind of thing this channel normally focuses on, but is a game I thoroughly enjoyed nonetheless. Then you'll know Super Rare Games. I've dealt with these guys before. Now, Lone Ruin is a game that was released back in January, and I was sent a code for it by them back in January, but ultimately I just found that as much fun as I was having in the game, there were too many issues with it to really recommend spending money on it. I enjoyed my time with it, but there was no real sense of progression, a lot of things got old very quickly. I have been told that the Fool's Errand update, which came out yesterday, has addressed a lot of these issues. So what I'm essentially going to do is jump in and try and showcase this to the best of my ability, because I genuinely suck at this game. But I do honestly really enjoy it. And straight away we now have this Fool's Errand, which appears to be a case of make the game harder for bigger rewards and additional stuff. Like here I can up this and eventually get the Cloak of Choice. I quite like that. I like scaling difficulty, although admittedly that requires me to, be somewhat decent at the game to begin with. Now before we go too far into this one, obviously I think it's worth pointing out it's a pixel art game, if you hadn't already guessed by what you're looking at on screen here. And I have a bit of a soft spot for well-done pixel art games. This you're seeing on screen there, that full face there, is absolutely fantastic. I have talked about a game called Crying Suns that is much more like this channel's kind of content, that is heavily pixel art, and I think it is a beautiful game. So what do we have as our first options? We've got upgrades on Shards or Barrage, I don't like those, or Pulse. We're going to go with the Chain Lightning, I reckon. You do get a chance to just sort of try things out against the target dummies here before you go ahead. Now this is kind of like what I would refer to as a twin-stick shooter. Your WASD keys move the character around, the mouse pointer is your aiming reticule, and we do have left click for an ability, right click for an ability, and spacebar for our dash. It's essentially a roguelite, as in that you kind of get to choose which room you go into, you fight a bunch of enemies, claim those upgrades, and then continue along the path, and eventually there are some boss fights there as well. Now the boss fights were actually something I did really enjoy in the original version of the game. I had a lot of fun playing those. They're very much like Dark Souls bosses, or even bullet hell bosses, in that they are genuinely nails hard. They require you to learn their patterns and their movesets quickly and efficiently in order to not die. Now, as I said, I'm not particularly good at this game. I tend to forget that the dodge button even exists for the most part, and even when I do remember that the dodge button exists, I have an unnerving ability to dodge straight into enemy fire, or worse, directly off the end of the map. This is why I like the Chain Lightning, because Chain Lightning, essentially, I can just focus on my character, where the character is standing, and I can move them around, and I just aim in the vague direction of the enemies that are, trying to attack me. It's a lot simpler that way. Nova or Grenade. I have no idea what either of those do, so we're going to go for Nova, because that sounds a bit more spacey, and you know how I feel about this. Now, essentially, the game does have this kind of gameplay loop of you run into a room which has these different sort of layouts and environments. No, don't run off the edge. You are then tasked with killing everything in the room before moving on to the next room. And these bats, goodness, these bats, I absolutely detest the bats in this game. Like in real life, bats are cute and fluffy and amazing, don't at me, it's the old goth in me, but I love bats to pieces, but not the ones in this game. They can genuinely go to hell and stay there. These little jumpy things, they're fine. I can keep range on them, I can shoot in their general direction, they come out in groups, so the Chain Lightning tends to wreck those nice and quickly. But when you've got a lot of bats like that, I tend to start over-dodging, and that's when I'm going to jump off the side or straight into something else. Now that was actually that's not a clear yet. I was going to say that was a really nice room clear. Now it's a room clear. I've got the Barrage, the Nova. Press E to pick up projectiles all around. That's going to be a right click, so let's give it a quick try. Oh, I do remember this one. Yeah, it's the one where you get a little dome around you. It's got a long cooldown. And if you overcharge it, it actually gets smaller. You want that big one there, and it will blast everything around you. Cool. Chained Hearts. Let's go for that, because that sounds like a health pickup, and anything that's going to help me survive is going to be a good thing. Now, whilst I'm playing this, because I am terrible at setting up my microphone and the in-game audio, like at one point maybe on Streamlabs I will find a way to separate those as two audio channels, which will allow me to edit them, you know, later on in in editing, I guess. But until then, I kind of play with the sound effects on for me, but the Streamlabs recording isn't going to grab the sound effects for you guys, which is kind of a shame because the audio design on this game is genuinely spectacular. I love the music, and this is going to sound really weird. It's like a really sort of paradoxical description of this, but the music in this game is somehow on this line between being really chill and giving you the impetus to push on. Like, there's a lot of sort of electronic, near drum and bass kind of, like, you know, my understanding of electronic music genres isn't great, so you'll have to forgive me. Increases player healing. Yes, hell, I'm glad I went for that one. We have a glowy ember. Or that just looks like 2 upgrades, so we're going to go for that one. It's electronic music with a good pulsing beat to it that kind of gets you in the mood for the combat and moving around, but it's not one of those like ridiculously aggressive soundtracks either. Like, this isn't Doom. This is not the Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal soundtrack by any stretch, although I love those soundtracks to pieces. Mick Gordon is a god amongst men. But essentially, try not to die. But it's this weird mix of surprisingly chill music that at the same time kind of gets you wanting to move and suits this game really well and just gives it this really cool vibe. As I said, the first time I went around this game and started playing it, God, I hate those tree things. They're worse than the bats. The first time I started playing this game, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, and it was one of those games that I would pick up and play for like half an hour to an hour. Yep, died to the tree. Pick up and play for like an hour, only to then essentially, you know, kind of something else comes along and I get on with playing that instead, and I have fun with whatever else it is I'm playing, and I don't come back to this for a while. It's one of those games that ultimately, it was very short burst for me, and I loved it, and I loved the sound design, I loved the graphics. The gameplay loop is not my usual kind of thing, but I did really enjoy it. I say it's not my usual kind of thing. I'm actually quite a big fan of bullet hell shooters. Ikaruga, I actually have a tattoo on my arm, is one of my favourite games of all time. I like bullet hell. But when it comes down to it, it's... let's go for a fireball. How does that work? Okay, that might be an even better one. Let's give that a try. Ultimately, I enjoy this kind of game, but it's not the kind of thing I would necessarily pick up myself. And with the content that was available at the cost that it was, it's not an expensive game by any stretch on Steam, and it is on Nintendo Switch as well, I should point out, where it is a true twin-stick shooter. Oh god, I can't aim for crap. Where it is a true twin-stick shooter on Twitch, on the Switch. We'll get there in a moment. My brain will start working, I promise. Yeah, this is a bad upgrade for me to be using. I don't think we're actually going to get to showcase one of the bosses. I may have to just kind of jump ahead until we hit a point where I do that. But as much as I enjoyed the game, it was a hard recommend because it was so easy to pick up and play, but it was then ridiculously easy to just put it down and leave it down. It didn't feel like there was much in the way of meaningful progression or much difference to a run. The enemies got pretty samey pretty quickly. Trying the different upgrades was cool, and chasing leaderboards. You know, if you're the kind of person who enjoys chasing leaderboards, if you grew up in the 80s, 90s, and sort of that arcade leaderboards chasing is very much your jam, then this game will be too. But it made it hard for me to recommend... Oh, Flame Breath. Hell yes, that sounds amazing. Let's go for that one. It just made it a really hard recommendation at the time, because it's like, you know, I want to respect your guys' money, and as much as I think this is a really fun game, I just don't think you get that much out of it. But we'll see how the progression here now changes things. As I said, there has been a update recently that's added that new progression system, and new stuff going on. I'm hoping that we get some new enemies, some new bosses, stuff like that, because it was just the same 3 bosses last time I played as well, and they were cool, but by the time you kind of understood it, there wasn't much difference between any of your runs anymore. You know, you just kind of kept running until you got to that boss. The room layouts might be different, like where all of the enemies choose to spawn, where your stairs and your holes in the floor are, but does that really make for overly interesting gameplay. No, not really. Oh, I could really do with some health upgrades here. Eek. Blasted bats. Eek. And again, there we are. I completely forgot that I even had the blasted dodge button. It's like a core game mechanic, and I keep forgetting that it's there. That's how bad I am at this kind of stuff. There we go. Okay, cool. Now we have the flame breath. How does this work? Oh, yeah, that's more my kind of thing. I'm only on 1 heart of health, though, so, well, we'll have to see how long I can survive with that. We've got the shop, or we've got the syringe again. Let's go to the shop. I don't think I've got enough to buy myself anything remotely useful in this. Like, I need more health. Not enough gold. Return some HP. Now, there is a way to sell stuff. But yeah, dash upgrade, upgrades the spell, flame breath upgrade. Yeah, let's just go for that. Reach further, more impact damage, or add charges. Let's go for longer range because my aim is atrocious. And move on to the next area. Heart of gold or syringe upgrade. Maybe the syringe upgrade. No, the syringe gives you more haste on lower health, which can be useful. I mean, this is kind of the point. There's a lot of depth to this game. Like, there is genuinely a decent amount going on here. There are meaningful decisions to be made about which rooms you go through, which upgrade paths you try to chase, which of the weapons you use and abilities, that kind of thing. You know, there are different builds. And I think there's a lot of versatility within those builds that give you the option to try new stuff, and I think that is very much where the replay value of this game comes in. I'm sitting there saying, like, you know, it's the same bosses and that, and I think the idea is to try and chase the leaderboards on that as much as you can, whilst equally, don't die to the tree, don't die to the tree. How often do you hear someone say that? Don't die to the tree. Or the bats. As you know, if you enjoy chasing leaderboards, then definitely the content is absolutely there. But if you're looking for something more meaningful than that, then you do kind of get the fact that, yeah, you can try the different upgrades, different spells and abilities on each run and see how that changes things. You can kind of try new builds. It kind of feels almost Diablo-esque in that regard, I guess. But whether or not this is your kind of thing, I think you've probably decided by now. If you're still watching this video, chances are this is the kind of game you enjoy, or you just like watching me fail at games absolutely spectacularly. I don't know. It's one of those two things. I really need health. It's one of those two things, and I don't know which one, and I don't honestly mind which one either. But if you're trying to decide if you like this game, you should probably have an idea already. Oh, that's an awful place for the tree to be. Oh, because it's right at the top of the stairs, which means it's very hard for me to actually hit that from range, which is how I did it last time, and that worked really nicely. Which means I've just got to kind of poke my head up and rinse it instead. Whenever that's off cooldown. Lots of enemies. Before I die. There we are. We've got rid of the first tree, but then a second one has spawned, and I'm dead. Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to hit it to the bosses. I am going to call it there, because otherwise we're just going to be watching me run around dying on this. Ultimately, I'm going to be completely honest, I really enjoy this game. Like, there's a lot to this. You've got the standard ruin run, you've got survival. If you like leaderboard chasing, then absolutely this is the kind of game you are going to thrive on. And it's not expensive on Steam, and Super Rare Games are a great little publisher that pick up all these little indie studios and help them make the games that they want to make. And I really respect that. I think Super Rare Games are honestly one of the best little publishers around. They do these cool little mixtapes that you can buy super cheap. It's like a USB stick that comes in the shape of an old, like, stereo cassette player tape that you plug into your laptop, you download the games off that, and they come with a whole collection of these really cool indie games. And Lone Ruin, for me, if you like leaderboard chasing, this is going to be a game you thoroughly enjoy. If you like your twin-stick shooters and bullet hell, it's going to be the kind of game you really enjoy. I just think it's a very niche game on that, and I think some people are going to love it and some people aren't going to get on with it. So, as for this review, kind of make of that what you will. It is a great game if this is the kind of thing you're into, but I'll be honest, there's not much here for people who aren't into this kind of stuff deeply. Like, if you're just sort of glancing interest, you're probably going to get bored fairly quickly of it. If you're the kind of person who likes to perfect a run and a build style, and you like those roguelike games that get you to push that and try new things, you're going to love this. I enjoy it, and if only for the soundtrack, I do honestly think it can be worth your time, but it's going to be very, very personal as to whether or not that's you. Anyway, folks, thank you ever so much for watching this one. Once again, huge shout out and thank you to Ryan at Super Rare Games for sending me a copy of this. I am genuinely enjoying this. It's a cool little game, and I hope any of you who do pick it up really enjoy it as well. Thanks for watching, folks. Happy sailing, and see you all next time.